Hey, I'm Matt Nichols of MrMaple.com, and welcome to another Mr. Maple video. Today we have a little bit of a celebrity appearance here on our page. We're super honored to have Jim Putnam of HortTube.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Honestly, I wanted to come out last year, and the world kind of threw some curveballs at us, and it's been upside down. But I'm glad to be here today.
Yeah, so we've been talking about doing this for a while, and we're just so honored to have a small collaboration with this guy. I mean, amazing information. Check out HortTube. If you're subscribed to us, you definitely know about his page already. It's huge, but definitely check him out if you haven't already. There's so much good information there. And today we're going to be talking about some great uses for Japanese maples, specifically container gardening with Japanese maples.
Yeah, that's my main use with Japanese maples has always been in containers. I was just joking with Matt before we started this video that I probably like my Japanese maple more than I like my house, and so I keep it mobile. I keep it mobile. One thing to know on container planted Japanese maples, I'm in zone 7. And so the zone 5 hardy plant is probably okay in my container. Don't have to do a lot of winter protection. If you were in a colder area, you'd want to protect it a little bit. And the other thing is, if you want to keep one for a long time in a container, you barely step it up when you plant it. So about every other year, this thing gets 1 more inch of space.
I think that's great advice. We get a lot of questions on how frequently you should step them up. And we like to not start out in a giant pot. So you don't want to start out from a 1 gallon into say like a 20-gallon container. I feel like what you're going to get is a lot of root growth at first when you do that.
Yeah.
And if slowly stepping them up, like he's saying, you're going to get a more consistent growth, and it's going to be easier for you to grow this tree long term in a pot that way.
It is, and container growing them also gives you some opportunity to do what I've done, which is make interesting shapes out of them, and take your time with it and enjoy it. The other thing about I'm in zone 7B. Almost 8, and they definitely have to go in a park shade area, so the selected space.
Yeah, I get a lot of questions about that frequently too, and there's a lot of Japanese maples that do great in full sun that might not love full sun in a container, because you have to take into consideration how hot that container is going to get as well.
Yeah.
That's a great part of the conversation there is, how warm is this container itself going to get? Do I have a material that's going to have a lot of reflective heat? Is it in an area where it's going to, is it beside a pool where there's no shade at all, and it's going to get a lot of reflective heat? You need to take those things in consideration. We're picking your location for your container. Late day shade is typically ideal for a pot. I mean, you don't want to have it somewhere where it's going to have all day exposure typically.
Yeah, very true. What type of soil mix are you guys using in yours? Are you using a bark mix?
We have a pine bark perlite peat moss mix. It's a really well drained mix. Our mix will drain out a little bit quicker. We typically recommend,
because you're overhead, you're irrigating, and you got to balance this out. So
we like for them to have just the maples love good drainage, so we try to increase that drainage to the max. Now we're going to water a little bit more than most people are in your planter container. So what I recommend doing is adding a little bit more natural soil to it too. So you're getting the best of both worlds, where you're not in a situation where it dries out too quickly, but you're also not putting it out there, in something that's gonna, dry out immensely in like seconds.
Yeah, and I use a pine bark soil conditioner and compost blend with mine, and that seems to work the best for me. And I fertilize my container. I'm fertilizing with plant tone. I think a lot of people would probably use something different, but I'll coat the top of that soil with plant tone in the spring, and then come back about midsummer one more time. That's it. Just barely cover the soil with plant tone.
That's great information. And we do something very similar. Like we want to go, the number one thing we always try to focus on, especially with Japanese maples in containers, is good drainage. That's something we always try to emphasize to folks. One of the number one things I see that goes wrong with Japanese maples in containers is that ring of death underneath it. You don't want the the tray catching all the water. If you walk up to your Japanese maple in a container and it's kind of like squoosh, 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 and you're like, I don't know what's wrong with it, that's typically too wet. So you want to make sure you don't have a tray underneath it holding water. Ways to increase drainage out of that container are going to give you a healthier, happier plant, so it's not stagnant in that just too dense in water. Can easily be a bad problem for one.
Yeah, one other point I would make is the container. A lot of the containers I use just have the center hole in the bottom, which you have to have a hole in your container. But if you just have the center hole and you place that down on the soil, eventually it will not drain out of that hole very well. So put little feet on the bottom of your container, elevate it just a bit.
I've done some cheap ways, like you can even go to like Lowe's or Home Depot and get some paint stirs for some cheap pot feet. Or you can go as fancy as you want. But the key is that it's not suction down. I mean,
Yeah.
you put that on some concrete, suction that down, and that's going to hurt your winterization as well if it's staying too wet. Typically, our rule of thumb is in zone 5, you're going to have to protect planters. Like maples work 5 through 9 in general, but in zone 5, you want to bring those in and protect them. Typically, and it's not an exact science, but we typically say that being in a container brings them down 1 zone for the cold hardiness for those roots.
Right. Yeah, I say one zone, but be careful. Two zones you're safe. 1 zone, caution.
Right.
No, if you're in the same zone as it's hardy to, careful.
You're gonna need some protection.
It has to be protected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Tim Nichols with MrMaple. We have Jim Putnam here today, and so Matt's been in the conversation with him during our last little segment, and I had to jump in here for this segment because why not? We got a celebrity here.
Not a celebrity. Definitely not a celebrity.
In the plant world, and it's an honor that you're here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
This next little segment, we're going to talk a little bit about putting a Japanese maple out in the landscape.
Okay, yeah, and again, being in zone 7, I think that when you're looking at something that's hardy in zone 5 to 8, 5 to 9, whatever it is, you can a lot of times assume that as you get up towards zone 5, you could probably have a little bit more sun on them. And as we get further into the south, you're probably going to need that plant and a little bit of shade. That's especially true with Japanese maples, and especially the lighter foliage cultivars.
Oh yeah, that's for certain.
Yeah.
And there's different cultivars that can handle different sun requirements on ones that are super heat tolerant, ones that are definitely ones that want a little more protection from the hot afternoon sun. But whenever you give protection from the hot afternoon sun for any Japanese maple, they're going to thrive and do well typically.
Yeah. The one thing you want to talk about though is definitely having good drainage. This is a plant that, we're definitely making sure we're not burying the grafts, and we're definitely making sure that everything that you can see at the bottom, I talk about this frequently on the channel, everything that you can see down to that soil, you should still be able to see after you finish planting it and mulching it. So pull the mulch back, but do mulch, because mulch keeps the roots on these things cool during the summertime. Summer is when the stress is, main stress. Would you say the main stress on Japanese maple is the heat of the summer, like we're standing in this greenhouse on a in the sun right now
in August?
Yes, yeah, I need to be mulched right now, but no, mulch is super important. Keeping the ground covered, but don't mulch up onto that trunk.
Yeah, if you over mulch, key things I see with plants that die, they get waterlogged. People give them too much water. They get hit with weed killer. They bury the plant too deep when they plant it, and then you see that heat stress come into it during the summer because the shallow roots of a Japanese maple aren't getting the oxygen that it needs to really thrive.
Yeah, and that's true with grass. Don't let grass grow up to the base of it. I do consultation work on my channel, with people on my channel, and they'll send me photos, and there's, I can tell you what's wrong with it. There's grass growing up to the bottom of it. Grasses and trees don't play nice with one another.
No, they don't, especially when the grass is just wicking away all the moisture away from the Japanese maple. Japanese maples have a shallow, non-invasive root system, which is ideal for planting out in the landscape.
It is.
But if you put something that has a vigorous root system that's going to root out around the Japanese maple, it's going to cause that Japanese maple to stress and not get the water and nutrients that it really needs to thrive and do well in your garden.
Absolutely. Okay.
So while we've got you here at MrMaple, we'll put you on the spot. What is your favorite thing about Japanese maples?
My favorite thing about Japanese maples, I think, is that they're timeless and they fit any garden space. I think that there's one for everybody. There's one for every situation. There's, and I feel like so many things are so temporary. Japanese maples don't seem temporary. Yeah.
And do you have any fond memories of Japanese maples that you can think of in your past?
No, other than the fact that I've been toting them around, leaving them in containers so that I can always tote them around. This is not a plant that I want to that I want to get rid of. I mean, we're in the nursery business, and it gets tough. People want to talk about your favorite plant, or favorite variety, and a lot of times, it's the one I'm looking at. Right then, I go, wow, that's my, and then a week later, that can really change.
Yeah. What would you say is the hardest thing about growing a Japanese maple? If you were going to give someone a tip on the number one thing that you've had experience with growing Japanese maples?
I really think it's a watering. I think it always comes down to watering. It comes down to making sure that they're adequately watered during the summer so that they're not desiccating from the heat, the sun taking the water out of the leaves faster than it can get water to it. Even in the winter, being concerned that they're not desiccating when the soil can, if you're growing a Japanese maple in zone 5, the soil can freeze and the top of that maple can actually desiccate and get damaged that way. So, but then not being so, check it before you water it. I say that they need water, but I mean, again, everything, check it first. If it needs water, water them thoroughly. It's a plant that doesn't want to stay dry either.
That's what we always see. People send us photos, they say, what's going on with my plant? 9 times out of 10, it's a water issue.
Yeah, right.
We look at it, it's either too much water or too little water.
Right.
And it could be too little water just for a period of time that causes an issue, or too much water over a long period of time.
Right, and I'll tell you the one way that I think people kill most plants is they water and water and water, and then the water starts to do a little damage to the plant, and then the plant goes into kind of a little bit of a shutdown. And if you backed off at that point, you'd probably be okay. But then they just keep pouring it on, because you can get a wilt, what looks like a wilt, from an overwatering issue.
You sure can.
Yeah.
And often underwatering and overwatering look just the same.
Yeah.
Like you'll see it and you're like, I don't know which is happening, but one of these two things is happening. You're either overwatering or underwatering, and only the person who's doing the watering actually knows what the issue is.
Right, yeah, and that's the thing about, I just tell people, you got to check. There's no answer to this. It's go out there with a finger, dig down a couple inches, and if things dry, drown it and then forget it. Drown and forget. That's the best watering strategy.
Yeah, the people that have the biggest problems are the people who think that they have to go out there and water their Japanese maple for 2 hours a day, and then it's just always boggy in that wet feet, and that's gonna kill a Japanese maple quick.
Yeah.
But if you give it just an adequate amount of water, the tree's gonna really thrive and do well for you.
Yep.
Okay. Hey, thanks for clicking on our video, taking a quick look here, and we just greatly appreciate Jim from HortTube being here today. It's quite an honor for us. I don't say that lightly. It's quite an honor for us to have you here.
Well, thank you very much, Matt and Tim, for hosting me. And I have 2 videos going up on my channel with some of Matt's favorites and some of Tim's favorite plants. So make sure you head over there and check those out as well.
Yeah, it's one of the best horticulture YouTubes out there. I mean, you're going to learn so much. Definitely check it out. If you're on our channel, you already know about him. That's a given. But if you haven't already, check it out. There's so much good stuff there, and you're going to learn a lot. So we just want to say thanks for being there. Hey, click like and subscribe on our video. Make sure to share this with your gardening friends. God bless and have a great day.